do have to start by talking a little bit about your former employer over at ESPN, which is in quite the navel gazing phase, if you will. LeBron James was.
I like how you call it a phase.
Yeah, phase, whatever. LeBron James, he was on Pat McAfee's show on Wednesday in studio. Lakers in town to play the Pacers. Kudos to McAfee and his team for getting him in for over an hour to talk. And talked about a few things that I found pretty interesting. JJ Redick, Luka Doncic, LeBron's own relationship with the media, which flows from the reaction to the decision back in 2010. But he also took time to address the viral interaction that he had with Stephen A. Smith and Stephen A.'s response to it. Take a listen.
Never would I ever not allow people to talk about the sport, criticize players about what they do on the court. That is your job, to criticize or to, be in a position where, okay, if a guy's not performing, that is all part of the game. That's all part of the game. But when you take it and you get personal with it, it's my job to not only protect my damn household, but protect the players. And I think a lot of the media, including him, and I know he's gonna be happy as hell. He's gonna be smiling from ear to ear when he hears me talking about it again. Oh my God, he's gonna get home and grab some ice cream out of the fucking freezer and sit in his chair in his tighty whities on the couch.
I hope at some point you two do get a chance. But you're
dude, relax, bro. Relax.
Here's what I know now, Rachel. I am not watching ESPN tomorrow. That's for sure, because that's what ESPN is going to be about tomorrow. Stephen A. response to LeBron, to McAfee. I just can't bring myself to do it.
Chris, you don't have to wait until tomorrow. We're recording this in the middle of the day on Wednesday, and I believe ESPN has games Wednesday night. I assume that Stephen A. will be delivering a soliloquy this evening, so you may want to adjust your viewing schedule that way.
I know, and I'll be watching. I think the Celtic game is on ESPN. Actually, I'll be watching that at 10 o'clock. But no, I don't need to see that reaction. I mean, this was kind of inevitable. I do think LeBron has a bit of a point. Like, I do think Stephen A. wanted to address it because it's good content for the show, for his YouTube page. Yeah. At the same time, I think LeBron also could have chosen a less public setting to, say whatever he wanted to say about it. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it was about his son that Stephen A. specifically said that set him off. There were a couple of different clips that were out there of Stephen A. maybe being a little too condescending about Bronny.
I think it was and LeBron made this point today, the real ringer, bell ringer was, as a father, I'm pleading with you, this is in Stephen A's words, to stop this, to get him off the court as a father, as a parent, if you, and sort of expounded, and I'm not quoting here, but expounded on the idea of, if you really cared about your son, you wouldn't be putting him through this. And so that's the quote that LeBron was responding to in the moment. And that's sort of what he addressed today as well, was, look, you can criticize my son on the court all you want, but don't take it personal. Don't bring it into my own house, is how he phrased it. And that's what he was talking about. And of course, as we all know, and you played the clip, he addresses the fact, I'm sure Stephen A.'s loving this what's happening right now with you, Pat, because he's going to use it as content for the next few days. And of course, the Taylor Swift tour quote as well is just priceless.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of ESPN on ESPN crime over the next couple of days as this interview gets dissected at a micro level. Also, our guy Wendy taking shrapnel out there.
That's
LeBron.
Yes,
that was
not cool, but
that wasn't cool. Like, Wendy's never portrayed himself to be LeBron's best friend. He has gained from the relationship with LeBron and covering LeBron, has written books about LeBron, but I've never heard Brian claim that he was, tight with LeBron in ways that we know some media members are tight with players. Like, yes. I've never gotten that vibe.
No, and Wendy's addressed it, back, 3 or 4 years ago, saying he did have a closer relationship with LeBron when they were both younger and in Cleveland and, that sort of thing. They were from the same high school, but that has changed over the years. And that was as far as 3 years back, saying that they weren't close. And he specifically said that. So I'm not sure what that specifically was about with LeBron, but I do think it's interesting that it's the Pat McAfee show that LeBron went on, because Pat operates outside of the ESPN system. The contract that ESPN has with Pat is that they basically produce their entire show themselves, and they deliver ESPN a finished product to put on the air live in the middle of the day. And so they are not tied to ESPN's internal rules about what goes on the air and doesn't. They're not tied to the whims of different ESPN producers or sort of hierarchy of who can be talked about. Can Stephen A be criticized? Can he not be criticized? That sort of thing. You know, famously, when Woj was at ESPN, Pat McAfee never had him on, to my knowledge, but did have Shams, who was Woj's biggest rival at the time, on all the time. So there is definitely a history there with Pat since he's been at ESPN of sort of, you know, thumbing his nose at what's the convention for ESPN basketball coverage. And I think we saw that today too. And I don't think it's a coincidence that LeBron went on his show as opposed to going on any of the other shows, which I have not seen him on in quite a long time.
No, this was, you know, I think he wanted this kind of setting. And look, Pat's become known for providing these kind of safe spaces for high profile athletes, Aaron Rodgers being the most notable of the bunch. And there were some interesting things that came out of that. I did find it illuminating some of LeBron's thoughts on Redick, on the team itself. I did find it interesting. He talked a little bit about the decision back in 2010 and how that led to a general distrust that he had of the media. And he sort of like, you know, pointed out that he was just trying to have some fun, raise some money for people kids down in Connecticut. And all those things are true. But even LeBron would be the first to tell you in the aftermath that he wouldn't do it again because he didn't do it again, right? In 2014, he did that essay with Lee Jenkins, which went over a lot better than the decision. 2018, he just put out a press release. So look, I mean, there were a million. Look, he's a kid, and he had a bunch of young people around him back in 2010. So if that's the most egregious error that he's made up until this point, which it seems to be, there's not a lot to criticize LeBron about. But that wasn't, you know, it wasn't that he went on TV and, you know, if he had gone on TV and said, "I'm going back to Cleveland," we wouldn't be talking about the decision. He went on TV and basically said, I'm taking my talents to South Beach and leaving the Cavaliers. I think it was more, if you're going to, you know, dump on a city and tell them you're leaving, don't do it on national TV like that in such a spectacular way. Even he and the people he has around him who have grown into successes in their own rights, Maverick Carter, Rich Paul, all of them, they know that was not, they wouldn't do it again. In a million years, they wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, I mean, after that special aired, you know, for about a year, LeBron was pretty defiant that he did nothing wrong. And I remember the sort of, I'm the villain, I'm wearing the black hat now, I don't care about being the villain. And he tried that persona on for his first year in Miami, and it didn't really work. And it didn't work because LeBron's frankly like too good a guy. He doesn't want to be the villain. He likes it when fans like him, and he likes having a good relationship with the fans. And that's great, by the way. We want that in some of our best basketball players. We don't want them to be the black hat. So I think there was a lockout after that first year. And actually, LeBron sat down with me, and for the first time at the end of the lockout, when he was going back to Miami for his second season there, that was the first time he ever said, "I'm sorry," and that I did this wrong. And that came out of some long talks with some of the new people he had been working with over the summer and through the lockout, and some talks he and I had leading up to the interview, where he really was ready to acknowledge, you know what, this wasn't a good way to do this. And to your point, it's because you're playing with the emotions of a city and a part of the country, frankly, that especially at that time was dealing with a lot of migration out. A lot of people were leaving Cleveland, businesses were leaving Ohio, and there was sort of a feeling of, you know, nobody wants to be here. And then you have this favorite son who has represented you for so long, really making you wait and going on this tour and doing all of this public stuff and then delivering this crashing blow on national TV at the end. And, you know, it's like someone breaking up with you after stringing you along for a long time and then announcing on Instagram with your new girlfriend, "Oh, by the way, this is how you found out I'm leaving you." So he acknowledged in that interview and then in the time since that was a mistake, and clearly has behaved completely the opposite since it, and deserves a lot of credit for that. And to your point, if that's the biggest mistake he's made, I mean, that's, you know, people want to compare him to Michael Jordan all the time. He comes out favorably in that category as well compared to Michael Jordan. So I had no problem with what he did on the court with Stephen A. If Stephen A. had wanted that handled privately, he could have and decided not to. So I didn't have a problem with LeBron when he saw him for the first time, sort of in that close proximity, because Stephen A. is not normally on the court in LA. When he comes to games, he sits in the media section, which is into the stands. And LeBron is not going into the stands to talk to Stephen. So this time he was courtside with some tickets that were provided for him. And that's why LeBron came over in that moment. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with him defending the way he is a father to his son and saying that is not public fodder and Stephen A. that's not for his opinion. So I don't have a problem with that either. The media tour Stephen A. went on is as predictable as rain. And, the fact that, as we said, it will be predictable that tonight it will be addressed by Stephen A. Tomorrow it will be addressed by Stephen A. Probably for the next 3 or 4 days, it will be addressed by Stephen A. because that is how he makes his money. And hopefully by the time the playoffs roll around, we don't have to talk about this anymore.
Oh, I think we will. I think at some point it will come up in the postseason as well. By the way, this all started over Bronny and how he was playing and how he wasn't an NBA player. Some people starting to come around on that a little bit, based on some recent play by Bronny. 17 points against Milwaukee, his best game by far in the NBA. He's been tearing up the G League. I know that's not, nobody will look at that as being impressive, but, beating up on, semi-pro guys or pro guys that are a cut below the NBA level at 1 years old is pretty impressive. That's pretty remarkable. Like these are all real positive steps to make you believe that, hey, they might actually have something in Bronny James, not as a star, not on LeBron James level, but someone that, could be a back end of the rotation player as his career progresses.
And you and I have been on the record saying that since the moment he debuted in the league. So, we have always thought that about him, that he is an actual real player. We talked about it just last week. We talked about it, months and months ago, and it is what I expect to see from him. And I don't think it's fair to criticize LeBron for how he's parenting his child. Those kids are doing really well. And I think that is very difficult in the environment they have grown up in. Again, look at Michael Jordan's kids. We haven't seen the same from them. And Bronny, and I know you spent time around him. I've spent a long time around him. I've known him since he was literally born, is one of the nicest, sort of humble, team-oriented kids that I have seen come into the pros. And he is always there for his teammates. He is never trying to take the spotlight, even though, of course, he is thrust into it. He is always thinking about that and how it affects the guys on his team. And that is, frankly, a feat of parenting. I would put a lot of credit to Savannah because I always credit the mom. But, again, I don't think LeBron deserves to be, criticized for how he parents. And I do think that's out of bounds. And, it's been addressed multiple times now.
And not to belabor the points, but we have, and I know I have for going back to his college days, believed that there is an NBA talent in there. I mean, I went to more USC games than I think most national media went to. I was there sitting at the Galen Center, watching him play for a large number. I don't even know the total number, 6, 7, 8 of his home games.
Yeah.
And this was after he was coming back from a near-death experience, a catastrophic near-death experience over the summer. And you watch him, you're like, there's talent in that kid. Like, he had difficult circumstances, putting aside the health stuff. He had difficult circumstances in that he was playing for a losing team and he was playing opposite another, lottery level talent in Isaiah Collier. So he couldn't really be the guard that I think he needed to be. But I've been convinced, and I said this many times, that if he had gone back to school for his sophomore year, he would have emerged as an NBA prospect, maybe a first-round prospect this season in college basketball. I think the question for Bronny is, can he develop into a point guard in the NBA? If he can be a day-to-day point guard, he doesn't have the size to be a 2-guard. Not everybody can be Davion Mitchell. He's got to be a day-to-day point guard. If he can develop those skills, he can be a competent enough shooter. He can be a very good defender. He's got the gifts defensively. Like, that's a guy that can be in your rotation, unquestionably, in my mind. I've always believed that in him. And the fact that he's here right now, just starting to kind of show some things, like less than 2 years after the near heart attack, is remarkable. Like, this should be applauded, what he's been doing in a very short period of time. I think it's only going to get better for him. I don't know what the hit rate is on second round picks, however you define hit, but it's less than 10%. That's for sure. And if he turns out to be someone the Lakers can use over the next, whatever number of years, that's a win. If you're the Lakers, that's a complete win. So,
my line about second round picks, they're like singles at a strip club. People give them out all the time in trades. They're not that critically important that you have to get so upset about the Lakers drafting Bronny and what they wasted. So obviously, I think he was a good prospect. He certainly made LeBron happy that the Lakers took him and have been able to play him the way they played him this season. And that's worth it to the franchise too. The franchise in general, though, I mean, obviously going forward is more important to them than going backward into the Bronny trade and Bronny draft.
Singles at a strip club. You're basically talking about my early 20s. Is kind of what that pretty much describes most of my early 20s. All right, we'll leave that alone.